mentioned before, sometimes we're going to be talking about things that are timeless, and sometimes we're going to be talking about things that are timely. And there's a deal that just happened. In fact, I didn't even know about this. This is how timely it is. And I pay too much attention to basketball right now with the playoffs going on. But apparently, Twitter has just been approved by the board that to be. I don't know. I just know it has something to do with Twitter. Matt, what's going on with Twitter right now?
Well, Twitter, one of the most iconic internet properties in the world, especially for communication. What was it, 2 weeks ago that Elon Musk put in a bid to acquire it for, I think like 44, $45 billion, something like that.
Was it
Um,
really? Wow.
yeah. And there was some pretty harsh pushback early on with him acquiring it, but it's kind of there's a lot of reasons why the board basically was forced to accept it.
Okay.
Um,
So this
but
is I have a I didn't know about the acquisition, but I do know some about the history of Twitter. So this might be a little bit more interesting discussion than you thought it was going to be, Matt. So
yeah,
deal with it. And also, coming by Christmas, the ABCs of Twitter and Elon Musk by Matthew Jensen. Maybe, who knows?
yeah,
All right. So if my memory serves, Elon Musk was one of the founders of Twitter.
no, he was
I was just joking
PayPal.
about that.
Okay.
PayPal, Twitter. They all have letters in them. They're
Tesla,
internet-ish. Well, didn't
SpaceX,
he have something to do
Solar
with Twitter
City.
though? Was he like part of the board or something at one time?
No, so
Like, see, now
he,
I'm just sounding really stupid. Thanks, Matt.
I think it was, time flies, right? Little kids, but uh, maybe 3 weeks, a month ago, he had built up a big stake in there. And after you get to a certain amount of stake in a company, you're kind of limited to that if you want to be on the board. So the board, they had basically publicly announced that Elon Musk would be joining the board, and part of this was that Elon loves Twitter, and Twitter is kind of accessible in a way. Like there's a lot of issues with the company, and he has a lot of money, as the richest person in the world, and wanted to do something about it. So somewhere, I'm not sure who's advising him, but somewhere along the way, he realized that he could do a lot more good for the platform, or change a lot more by not being on the board, because that doesn't necessarily have the big enough or as big enough power as being the owner of it.
Right.
So he bought more, lined up financing, made an offer, and Twitter has approved it today, the Twitter board.
Now, are you familiar with? Oh goodness, the comic strip, The Oatmeal.
Yes.
So several years ago, the Oatmeal put out a thing. I think it was the Oatmeal. It could have been Wait But Why. I get them mixed up, like you said, age.
Both great.
But they talked about how Twitter basically, by necessity, has to be in decline by about this year. That there's not a way that Twitter can gain any more people because, like, the amount of counts already triples the amount of people in the world. And I know businesses and stuff count up for some of that, and people have multiple profiles. So those people, Oatmeal and Wait But Why, the guys that run that, are much smarter than I am. And I can't remember which one it was. Probably definitely Wait But Why, and actually thinking about it more.
Yeah. Tim Urban. Shout out to
Yeah,
Tim
Tim
Urban.
Urban, absolutely brilliant, brilliant man who makes me feel better about my procrastination. Um, is this a good deal for? I mean, maybe Twitter, I think, benefits by far by getting money at all for something that has to constantly change to be able to stay relevant. But is this a good deal for Elon?
It's a fantastic deal. So
Why?
there's a lot to this. I just pulled up monthly active users in 2021, and the link is backlinko.com. Twitter users. It says that there's 396.5 million monthly active users. So that's basically, let's see. So that's basically like users that are active in a given month on the Twitter platform. So basically, kind of the population of the United States. And it's interesting with it because when, Facebook, Twitter, these companies really came out, there wasn't a way to necessarily value them as a company. So PricewaterhouseCoopers came up with this metric to value basically pre-revenue or early revenue tech startups that were in the social media space, and it was called monthly active users. So this is a big deal, and it's you can kind of think about it. So Netflix, for instance, they just had pretty poor earnings. Part of that was affected by their loss of a subscription base because of having to pull out of Russia. But they are a subscription business. So you pay basically a monthly fee times the amount of subscriptions, and that's their revenue. PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a consulting and accounting firm, came up with this metric where they're like basically saying, this is kind of $1 per user that your company is thought to be able to generate in terms of value each month. So this whole monthly active users metrics really became popular, and it became a mechanism for companies like this to go public with little or no revenue, essentially, which is for cash losing tech companies. You can only do so much with private money before you go public. So there are a lot of users, but I'm not an active Twitter user, but I think I still have an account out there. But from what I hear, there's a lot of bots. So it's interesting in many ways. Like, I think on one hand, this is going to make Twitter as a usable product for people a lot better, because now that they're going to be a private company, you can basically get rid of all those bots with AI tools to just cancel out the scammers without having to essentially destroy this monthly active user statistic that would in turn, trash the stock. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting things is Facebook, Twitter, they need bots to basically keep their valuations up, because how many people are actually interacting with real people on there? Like, nobody really knows. So I think it's a really probably a good thing for the customers, like the users of the platform, and I think it's a really good thing for Elon Musk too, from a financial perspective. So like with a lot of big businesses, you really kind of evaluate the businesses on a kind of a revenue per head sort of comparison, where it's like, I add another employee, they generate X amount of revenue, and that's a good way to kind of like keep your business in line, your headcount in line with your revenue potential. Twitter is extremely bloated, and it's kind of known as a bloated company. Like right before we got on here, I pulled up their revenue and their headcount, and revenue was 5.07 billion in 2021, last full year's earnings, and their headcount is 7,500. So that works out to, let's see, about 677,000 per employee, which seems like a lot, but you have Google, for instance, and I think Google's over 2 million per employee. So you have to assume that a lot of these bot users are going to be gone, and there's going to be basically probably a better way to generate revenue, ensuring that they're actual real users for advertisers and such. But with that too, who knows, right? It's probably 50% of the employees are going to eventually be laid off from there. And you just really think about, so if they cut out 50% of the employees, then they're basically generating 1.2, 1.3 million per employee at that sense. And let's see, I don't know what their profitability was, but so net income's way down. Operating income was 272 million. So basically all that savings is going to go to the bottom line. And Twitter, they'll be private, right? So nobody's really going to know how much they're going to be making, but it's an interesting thing because you have, unlike, so a lot of people are kind of criticizing it because it's kind of communication news platform, so to speak, and comparing it to, Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post, or Mark Benioff owning Time Magazine, or Lorraine Powell Jobs owning the Atlantic. But it's really kind of it's an interesting thing because unlike those platforms that have the brand name, there's like this whole technology ability to unlock a lot of profitability into it. So for Elon, it helps him build out this legitimacy as kind of a free speech warrior too, and it's something that he uses very well. But there's a lot of profit potential in there, and that's not really being talked about, I feel, from what I've been reading lately. It's really more of a culture war discussion rather than Elon Musk has the ability to buy this iconic property and treat it like you would a turnaround private equity like situation where you cut the fat and unlock its true profit potential.
I did find the reference I was looking for. I want to go ahead and make sure because I don't want people looking around everywhere. It was XKCD when he was
Also
doing
a
his
good
What
comment.
If blog. Yes.
Yeah.
It was comic number 65. It was taken out in October 2013. And he said at that time that based on his data, that Twitter will last at the most for 45 years. So based on that, we're still talking about 2057, 2058. So that might be still a steal of a deal for how many billion did you say it was?
It was monthly active users was under
No.
400
How
million.
much did they say he was buying it
I
for?
think it was 44 billion.
So 44 billion. So just a little, according if XKCD is right, a little bit more than a billion per year left on Twitter's life cycle.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the possible profit earnings. I think it's easier to think about what Musk and his people that they're going to make money, but is this going to be good for other businesses to be able to make more money, or is it going to be pretty limited to? Is it going to be similar to like newspapers where they make most of their money from people who read the newspaper and then buy the products of the ads, or what's that going to? Obviously, you're not going to know exact, but what in your mind? What is the business going to look like? The business model for personal businesses for the new next? Like, how are we going to benefit from Twitter being bought by Elon Musk?
I, 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 it probably goes most, I would say mostly from the advertising side. You know that if they do call all those bots, for the most part, you know that your advertising dollars are going to be hit by real users. So it's not going to be, whether it's advertising or outreach. Like I'm not I'm not a big user, so I'm not super knowledgeable about the platform, but the numbers will be more legitimate as you get the computers out of there. And
Right.
I think the discourse too will be um, more like kind of the town square, so to speak, that Jack Dorsey and Biz Stone imagined in the beginning. So it's it's interesting, and it like maybe I can compare it to um, my past doing financial market research, but let's see, back in was 2009, 2010, I wrote a paper about how it was basically talking about how computer speed and lower costs for servers and, basically to run bots and trading platforms would really shift the market more into this high frequency momentum trading atmosphere that we have today, and how that had the ability, since you're trading off of data points and news, to swing stuff in extreme directions quickly. Um, to compare it to what I'd say maybe Twitter with bots is the ability to pile on stuff. So promote things that are more extreme rather than kind of be a more natural discourse for human beings. So I it's really intriguing to see where it goes, and I think it's probably probably a lot of people. I haven't read much about it beyond the finance elements,
Right.
but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering whether or not Trump is going to be reinstated, and some of these other people. Um, that's probably good for Twitter's cash flow if Trump is reinstated, and it may be, like this started talking about businesses. I'd say it's good for people spending their money on it because they know that they're getting effective ad dollars. If they bring back some people that have been canceled and kicked off the platform, where it's more of a open platform where everybody is allowed to be, even if you don't like them, that's good for Twitter's cash flow, because then you're basically knocking down some of these alternative media apps if everybody's allowed to be there. So it's I
Okay.
think an iconic property that is now owned by Musk. It's there's probably a lot of people that are jealous that he got to do it.
So there's a couple different things going on in my mind when you mentioned that, and I'm going to go to another internet provider, CGP Grey. Do you know who that is?
No, I
Oh,
don't.
right, I finally got one you don't know. He put a he does little stick figure videos that usually pretty smart, but he's weird, good weird, but weird.
Probably
And
like
he
him.
he talked about, this was a few years ago. He was talking about one of the problems with social media as a general rule is that the way that they've been making money, at least, so this could change, but the way they've been making money is it starts siphoning you off slowly to where once it sees like you like something, that it's going to start showing you more of what you like. So
Yeah,
if you, so one of the big problems right now, specifically with Facebook, is that even though people say they're tired of hearing about politics, they can very easily, just really over the maybe the time period of maybe 1 or 2 months at most, very easily selectively put it where the only things that they're going to see are things that they already support.
yeah,
So,
totally.
in fact, I actually believe for the most part that unless you are very inactive on Facebook, you're going to, every time you go on, you're going to see what you want to see. I'm very careful about, I don't want to block or unfollow people that just disagree with me. So I do see a lot of differences, but that's also something that I'm carefully moderating on my own account. But I think most people are, I don't think they actually see the other side as much.
Yeah,
And CGP Grey has this really great thing about how it's almost impossible to get out of that loop unless you literally start liking things that you only have access to. And the only way you'd be able to do that is literally to have new friends that like all this stuff. And then on your stream, you're like, ooh, I like that. And you keep on liking it. And that's about the only way to combat it. So that being said, would I can see how Twitter would make money and Elon Musk could make money by bringing back people who have been canceled or banned. But would that not just cause another free for all where things are going to start getting heightened up again? We had a pretty rough couple years where every little thing that was said on Twitter was being blown out of proportion. And sometimes it was rightfully so, sometimes not so much so.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, do you think that Musk and company would do something to still allow for free speech but moderate? I mean, that's going to come back up again if you start letting in people. And it's not even a political thing on my side. I'm just looking at it as, yeah, it's free speech, but then there has to be some kind of limit. Otherwise, you're going to lose the other group of people.
Well, let's see. I think it was a Congress or someone did an investigation on basically the Russian troll farms a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was that they weren't necessarily favoring a political candidate. They were just trying to pile up on either side to create and sow division.
Right.
And those are mostly bots, right? It's not
Okay.
it's not realistic to really create that at scale without bots. So if this has an opportunity to cut out those bots with AI, say get rid of all the users that post every 45 minutes, for instance, and are acting like they're real people, right?
I have some friends that are probably going to be considered bots.
Yeah, that's funny. But like I'm not sure what to do. That's something I could help them come up with an answer with if I personally had access to their whole data stream on it. But it's there's going to be opportunities to have algorithms that basically call out the bots and make it into a more realistic discussion. So while Facebook, for instance, can't really do that because they need those monthly active users, that's a huge metric that they discussed to Wall Street, and it's better financially for them not to have an answer on that than it is for them to be like 30-40% of the interactions on our platform are bots or more. I could see that realistic be like 80 or 90% too.
Okay. Now I want to ask, because again, I haven't paid attention. I don't pay attention to news very easily. Every once in a while, did Musk specifically say that they're going to try to get rid of bots?
I believe he did.
Okay. The reason I was asking, because part of what I'm thinking is, I know in some sectors the bots are fairly profitable for the owners of the company. I mean, all the true fans and stuff, specific subscription-based video games, I'm actually kind of thinking about where the ones who want to get rid of the bots, like they do. There's no bots, or hardly any bots at all. But then there's other games, and World of Warcraft's actually one of them, though that might be changing with Microsoft owning it and stuff now. But where for years they've always had bot issues, and they've never really solved the bot issue, even though almost every other video game does. And I think part of it is because the bots pay for more subscriptions overall than the actual fan base does. And so I'm just kind of curious if that's something. But if Musk did say that he's trying to get rid of bots, then that changes that dynamic, and so we at least have something as a consumer to kind of hold him to, of how well is he doing that.
So I believe he did say that. I may be wrong. I know that he talked about open sourcing the algorithm, so you basically can understand why you're seeing certain stuff. And I'm not really sure how he would demonstrate that too. But if you look at Tesla's, I think all their patents
Right.
have been made public. So it would be,
SpaceX has as well, I
yeah.
believe.
So it would be in line with his culture personally that he's done. I also think that removing the bots make Twitter a better product,
Hmm.
like just from its sense. Like there might be applications, like I remember growing up, there was the AIM, AOL Instant Messengers that were bots that you're communicating with a bot, but you're also training the bot, the training the bot's artificial intelligence, so
Right.
the bot becomes better. Um, like I definitely think that there are a lot of applications that are positive for bots, but if you're talking about uh, like bots searching for keywords and talking smack or trying to fight with people, like they do on other applications. Like I know I've had been hit with bots on Instagram before, and they've had it set up too where you can't reply to them. So it's kind of like it was a weird scenario, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is a bot. So um, yeah, it's we'll see what happens. But I think there's kind of like the benevolent story of Elon Musk, but when it comes to it, Elon Musk is a businessman.
Yeah,
This is the
absolutely.
most iconic media type property that's become available forever. The board was essentially forced to take the deal, and I can talk a little bit about that if you're interested in that.
Yeah. Before, let's hold that for just a second, because one of the things that I think what you said is very important. This is not some kind of thing of charity. Um, this is not. This is very much for the purpose of making money. And though that might sound obvious, uh, there. This is your time, people. If you have a business that you're wanting to do something, and Matt will help figure out solutions that you pay him enough money, he'll find some solutions for you. But when Disney takes over or buys Fox and buys Lucasfilm and buys uh, Marvel and buys Pixar, um, you can whine and complain about the fact that they're buying all this property, but then you can also be looking like, well, wait a minute, what does this mean for me? And unfortunately, kind of like what you're talking about earlier about the culture war side, we're focusing on the wrong thing. Even if your goal isn't to make money, looking at the culture war is great. And in 30 years from now, that's going to be something that we can go like, oh yeah, I remember Elon Musk bought Twitter, and what Twitter was at the time. And from a historical perspective, it's going to be a lot of fun. But there are a lot of things that can change. And instead of reacting to the news of like, oh, okay, you can start planning on based on what Elon Musk's history has been, based on Twitter's history of starting to make some steps right now to really move forward and look at what does this mean for me as a person, me as a business to um, go in those directions, and hopefully you're not waiting till he actually tells you how everything's going to work and then like, oh, I'm going to get started now. Start doing some history now. I know there's several of you guys that listen to this who are working on increasing your business or you're starting a business and stuff. And I know this sounds kind of silly because we're usually very more informational, but this is the time to start moving forward with your plans of like, how are you going to use this to your advantage to being able to get customers that you might have had a harder time getting in the past? How are you going to use this to expand your reach of showing how you might be an expert in your field? And I want to make sure that that is said because you're going to regret it if you don't start, if you wait till a few months from now or even a year from now when everything gets announced officially on how things are going to move forward. You can already have a head start on kind of looking at tendencies because that's what Elon Musk does. He's has a fairly solid track record of how he does with businesses. Even though I said Twitter earlier, my memory starts coming back, and I start thinking about PayPal and some of that stuff, and some of the directions he was looking at to take PayPal, they rejected. That's one reason why he kind of had a split with the company.
Yeah.
And now PayPal, even though everybody knows it, it's really limited as what it could have been. And that was one of the reasons why they got rid of him, because he wasn't part of the family. He wasn't part of the culture that they wanted. And now PayPal's main thing is eBay. You guys remember eBay? No, you guys weren't born yet. Yeah, eBay used to be a big thing, but that's where PayPal put most of its eggs in its basket. Now it still has obvious applications, but I mean, it's been usurped by Venmo. It's been
Stripe.
usurped by Stripe. I mean, heck, even Google Pay. It's PayPal is not nearly as powerful as it was 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15 years ago. And some of that was because Elon Musk was trying to go a different direction. And because they didn't want to fit in with the culture, they won in the short term, I guess. But now he's controlling something that's going to even be take. I mean, really, you might want to sell your stocks at PayPal right now. This might be. I'm not an expert on that, but that PayPal didn't win on this one, and I don't see them somehow turning it to stone. But Twitter is going to be different no matter what, and this is the time to start figuring out how to use your business to get into Twitter. And I wasn't meaning to do this, but Matt happens to be a pretty smart guy, and he does take consulting fees and will help you with your business. But he probably doesn't want to talk about that right now. So we'll talk about what what it means for
Well,
what you said earlier.
yeah, you want to talk a little bit more about how, so it's kind of like this, before Elon, or actually, basically Twitter is trading about the same price it did when they IPO'd, and I think that was in 2013 or something. It might have been longer, but it was a long time ago. It was about a decade ago. So basically, people in charge, the board, has done shit to, excuse my French, but to grow the stock price, and they've lost a lot of money. So it really hasn't gone anywhere as a stock, and you're kind of in a situation where the board has, I'd say, in many respects, run it as almost a nonprofit in a way, where they've taken these more culture ideological approaches to a lot of stuff. But it's a publicly traded business, and the board has a fiduciary duty. There's a, it's just some interesting things like that you probably wouldn't know until you've worked with board members or served on boards. But if you're on a public company board, you're taking potentially financial risk too on yourself for the decisions that you make. And there's insurance that you can buy to protect yourself up to a point of liability towards that, but it doesn't really cover that much. So if they had, it was just a time where the Twitter board doesn't have anything to necessarily stand on in terms of really reasons why you shouldn't sell at this price. And I understand, like, in the last 12, maybe 24 months, stock price was higher than the current bid for it, which I think is about $54 a share. But that's, you can go in a whole discussion about how excess liquidity was running up tech stocks. That bubble has really kind of burst, and so you strip out the kind of the market sort of elements to it. The stock hasn't really gone anywhere in the last decade, and the board hasn't really done a great job of managing the company. So if they were to have rejected this, then I would have expected there be a flurry of shareholder lawsuits, which are essentially suing the board members personally for breaking their fiduciary duty to deliver, excess returns to the shareholders. And so it's kind of like a situation where it's when you go public, you lose control of your company. And if you're an entrepreneur too, and you take on VC money or private equity money, whatever, you're not necessarily in charge of what happens with that company. It really just kind of depends on how the stock is structured. That's why you saw, Facebook, for instance, is a good example. There's multiple share classes, and Mark Zuckerberg has a lot of the primary voting share classes. So he essentially retains control of the company and the direction of the company versus everybody else. But it's just when you're a public company, you have to deliver results, and that includes the board too. If you take certain steps that might be what you want, but at the financial expense or the perceived financial expense of the shareholders, then that's basically a situation where someone usually sues you, and get really expensive really quick. So I there's it's kind of unfortunate, I guess, in a way, that a lot of the shareholders aren't going to be able to follow along, and basically participate in the financial stuff as it goes private. Because I do see the potential in Twitter being a really profitable company, but I don't necessarily remember if it's like JP Morgan or whoever's providing the financing. I think there was also a equity partner too, beyond debt financing for the deal. And then Elon has his money, and also, I believe, loaned against his stakes in Tesla or SpaceX to get the deal done. But there's a huge profit opportunity. I kind of think what Michael Dell did a couple of years ago, partnering with Silver Lake Partners to take Dell private. There was a lot of value in there, but it's really hard to unlock that value when you're a public company too.
Yeah, and it makes it a lot easier to focus on the wrong parts of profit, because you have the short-term profit and you have the long-term profit.
Yeah.
And even though this isn't my area, it does seem like some of the things that have led to some great companies or like great products have been that they started looking at short-term only, trying to get the next quarter,
Yeah.
without actually looking at the problem of the next year or even the next 5 years. And I'm going to actually bring up World of Warcraft again. Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, that they kind of, once they started knowing that they're getting investigated and stuff, this is all public record, by the way. This is not something like I just know from inside sources. Basically, they like, well, hey, instead of trying to make a quality product anymore, like we were known to do, we're just going to start doing anything possible to make a profit. And they ruined the fan base, where like nobody's wanting to be a part of it anymore. They fired all the developers, or the developers quit, because it was such a hostile workplace. And then they're like, well, wait a minute, you guys don't want to play our game anymore? I know that's just one specific thing, but it hurt me last year. Okay, so it really still
and
stings.
now they're being acquired by Microsoft. So
Yeah, and it's weird because
there we go.
Well, but the damage has been done majorly. I mean, a lot of people went to Final Fantasy, and it's one of those things that, when you lose that group. Now, I know that's a little bit more specific than Twitter. It's not like there's social media doesn't compete for each other the same way that video games and stuff do. But it's very important to, sometimes the short-term profit is more important than the long-term profit. But
Well,
I'm generally a fan of the ones that are sustainable, not the ones that just get you the quick cash.
if you're a public company, you have to live quarter to quarter. You have to get the quarterly results, and you also have to build the long-term vision. But I go back to, I listened to a talk one time with one of the founders of, I think it's John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods Market, and he was talking about the Amazon acquisition. They were, after they were acquired by Amazon, since they're kind of like a lumped in with the whole Amazon pie, They're
Right.
not required to force or basically meet those quarter to quarter line items
Hmm.
that they had for the public markets. It changed how the company was able to deliver on its purpose,
Yeah.
because they're lumped in with Amazon Web Services and all these other things. So they were able to expand and lower profit margins on certain items, but really think about how you build a business that's more accessible to more people for the long term rather than living that quarter to quarter. We need to balance our purpose with also getting the most out of each customer we can right now, because otherwise we lose our jobs. So, and someone else is in our place to try to figure it out.
And I'm sure maybe there won't be because we have such a smart audience that listens to us. So probably this is just in my imagination. But there might be some blowback of saying, well, wait a minute, publicly traded is better. And we promise that if that is something you want to hear more about, just email Matt. He gave and I think it was episode 7 or 8. He talks about how you can contact us and give us some feedback and stuff. But contact him and say, no, you want to hear some of the benefits of publicly traded companies. We would love to talk about that. We're not going to do that now. Is
Well,
there
it's
anything else
it,
you want to talk about on Elon Musk and Twitter, or do we want to move on to some of our other fun subjects? Because we still have about 20,000 of them to go.
I was just going to make a last comment.
Yeah,
It's
please.
just public markets are great because you're able to achieve a higher value multiple on your business. So it's you're able to essentially build more wealth. Um, you're able to return money to a lot of your employees. You're able to more easily access debt markets to build your business. But it comes with a lot of downsides too, and you really are responsible to those public shareholders, whether they be banks or funds. You and I, if we own individual stocks.
Right.
So it changes the game. I think having this, it's kind of like I'd say an ideal situation sometimes, taking businesses that have a lot of potential and are basically held back by maybe who's in management or the board that can't be fired from just being an investor, but have had and raised that capital base to really build out the company, to come in and take it private and do what needs to be done to really bump up the value of that product and think more about the long-term strategy. So this will be really interesting to watch what Twitter becomes.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much potential there, from someone that's not a big user, but someone that analyzes stocks or works a lot with companies, knows a lot about the inner workings of private and public companies. But
Right.
there's a lot of potential value creation there for Elon, and a lot of potential, fun seeing where someone like that, who's a user himself, a very active user,
Right.
can bring in different integrations, partnerships, really see what happens on the advertiser front and how companies are using that to get their story out better, or target potential clients better. Like it's going to be exciting to see what happens.
Yeah, and as someone who pretty much hates Twitter with a passion, I was kind of hoping it would finally die, but apparently not. But hey, this is an
Twitter will
opportunity
never
for,
die.
yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
Maybe this Neuralink, you're going to be tweeting from thoughts in your brain.
That's scary. I work really hard to edit my thoughts before they come out.
Yeah, I probably should. My wife thinks I should more often. So
Well, she's a pretty smart lady, so